Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the Association of Psychiatrists for inviting me to speak this morning, and especially Dr. Dayal Singh, because I know that he was the one who pushed for this. I'm going to be very brave. I'm going to speak to this august bunch of people about the brain. So, which one of these do I press? This one?
Yeah, as soon as it comes up.
Well, okay. So I'm going to do two little bits of research. One is research that was done of the physical brain to show that there are differences in the architecture of the brain. And the second bit of research was done with function during phonological awareness and reading activities. It was done using functional MRI. So, oops, that went fast. Okay. Okay, we owe a lot of what we know about dyslexia to this wonderful man, Dr. Albert Galabuda from Harvard Medical School. He actually did, he sliced up brains of 10 dyslexics. I actually do need my glasses because I can't see there. Sorry. 8 dyslexic brains, 6 males and 2 females, and of course controls. And the findings confirmed that there are structural differences in the language area of the dyslexic brain as compared to the non-dyslexic brain. And you'll notice I don't say the normal brain, the non-dyslexic brain. So the 3 bits that I'm going to talk about, and I'll just list them and then we'll go through one by one, is there was a difference in symmetry, and the non-dyslexic brain is asymmetrical. And the dyslexic brain tends to be more equal in size, and the difference is due to a larger language cortex, which contains more neurons. So oddly enough, even though dyslexia is very often called a language learning disability, there's actually more language area in the dyslexic brain. The second bit of a physical difference he found was that there were more interhemispheric connections between the right and the left brain. And the third one is that he found there was some neuronal migration, and it was very specific, so we'll talk about that. Okay, so there's the brain just to show you. This is from Galabuda. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist, I don't know that much about a brain, but you can, if you have a look at the blue area, you can see that in the dyslexic brain, it's almost of equal size on both sides, while in the non-dyslexic brain, it's quite different. So, the ramifications of the larger language area. So the increased area is around here in the language area of the brain. As a negative result of this, we know that bigger isn't particularly better in the brain. What we're looking for in the brain is tight automatic connections. We don't want to put our finger in fire and 5 seconds later say, oh, that's burning me, I think I better remove it. Well, this is the same sort of tight automatic connection we need for reading. The child needs to see this symbol, this little black T, and automatically they need to be able to say that that is T. They need to see this little squiggle, T-H-E, and automatically know that it's the. So this larger language brain doesn't allow for that tight automatic connection, which leads to fluency. And typically with dyslexics, you see lots of head shaking, lots of head nodding. They're looking at it, they're saying, I know this, my teacher taught me this, let me think about that chart I have in my classroom. I can figure this out, but they can't get to it. Typically, one of the children said to me the other day, I was doing a screening, and he had to spell run, and he said, R. How does R look again, miss? So he couldn't just connect to that and access it, even though he'd been seeing that R, this was a 7-year-old, for an awful long time. The second negative that we see is language learning delays. A lot of times dyslexic present early with speech difficulties. They very often have articulation difficulties, but also memory for words. Naming difficulties, that's a tight automatic response. You see a thing like this, and you have to know that this is a microphone. You have to be able to say that. You can't just sort of keep calling thingamies and ungamies. And I have a bit of a story about that. A mother told me, he just can't remember words. Every day we've been having cheese toast for breakfast. Children always have to have the same thing for breakfast every day for the whole term. And then at the beginning of next term they say, I've never liked that. How could you give me that? Anyway, cheese toast was the order of the day. And he always called it, Mum, bread toasted on one side with cheese on top. Because he couldn't come up with that tight automatic word. On the positive side, this large language area is very well suited for unusual problem-solving activities. Think Albert Einstein, think Steve Jobs, think of any of the people in the last century who did wonderful, extraordinary things and made a big difference to us. Think of the people who thought of electric light. Edison was dyslexic. And I always say if it wasn't for dyslexic, we'd be doing this by candlelight. So there's also the wonderful sort of positive side of the dyslexic brain. Now, what about the interhemispheric connections? Very simplistically, I suppose, we know the right side is our visual spatial side and our left side is language sequencing side. And we also know, as I've said before, that in the brain, bigger isn't better. So we have all of these wonderful interhemispheric connections, but the message has got to get tightly from this side, that letter T, to this side, that sound, T, for reading, and the opposite way for spelling. I want to write a T. I've got to come on this side to access that little shape. So of course it gets lost. It's like the difference of driving to San Fernando on one road, takes you there, or being in Miami and being faced with one of those cloverleaf extraordinary what do they call them? You know what I mean? Interchanges, where you have to kind of figure out where am I going and you get lost. So the message gets lost. And that's the same thing we see with this reading where the message seems to be lost. So the children will typically they'll look at a word like top and they'll say mop. And you can cover that word and say, hang on a second, what's the first sound in mop? And they say, no, it's top, it's top, it's top. So it was always top. They always knew it was top, but the wrong thing came out. The message wasn't tight and automatic. And then also the difficulty with naming, as I talked before, you've got to access this physical thing to this name. Wow, that was quick. Okay, and then the neuronal migration, which was very subtle and restricted in location. And it was restricted to this sort of area here, which deals with strings of letter sounds, sequential things. And very close to this area here is also the area that deals with fine motor skills. So typically we see children having difficulty with getting sounds in the right order. Being able to sound out a word and work out that ot says pot. Being able to spell a word and get the sounds in the right order. So spelling words like help, H-L-E-P, and not noticing. Or looking at a word like nerve and saying never. So that sort of strings of information. We know that it possibly affects auditory processing as well. So dyslexics do have difficulty with processing language. And sometimes what they need is more time. And we also know that this neuronal migration occurs during gestation, so it is not what mommy did or daddy did or what the school didn't do. Although a lot of things can happen if mummies and daddies and schools do the right thing. Okay, so quickly the second bit of research was actually done by Torgensen et al. And one of the people who worked on that team actually comes down and trains teachers for the Dyslexia Association. And we're very proud of that program. And they used functional magnetic resonance imaging, during which time the subjects were asked to do a phonological task. And what they found was that there was significantly less activity in both hemispheres, but most notably in the left, which ties in with what Gallagher is saying. Okay, so there we have brain activity during reading. At the top we have the normal reader, the non-dyslexic child. And if you notice, in the left hemisphere, there's more activity happening. But if we compare it to the dyslexia child, the child with the reading difficulties, at the bottom, what are we noticing about what's happening in the left hemisphere? Not a lot. But look at what's happening in the right hemisphere. And I'd like to make a plea for this because this child is really trying hard. There's a lot going on. It's not that he's not trying to do the task, but he's using the wrong part of the brain to do it because his left brain is not well wired to do the task. And a lot of these kids are predominantly right brain kids. So it's not working for him. And you know, just a little plea, because a lot of times these children just got told, you're not trying hard enough. Well, they are trying hard enough. It's just not working for them. Okay, what was found is that after 100 hours of intervention, and they did 2 different interventions, one was the LIPS program, which we teach in Trinidad, and one was a phonics program called Embedded Phonics. After intervention, there was increased activity in the left hemisphere, and here's a lovely picture of that, so that you can go with that. So we look at, there's what you call subject 3 and subject 4, and you can see decreased activity in the right hemisphere after the intervention, 100 hours, and increased activity in the left hemisphere. So now this dyslexic child is now using the left hemisphere efficiently to read, write, and spell. And I'd just like to say, I know I don't have much time, but this was done in the United States of America. But we're doing the same programs here. We don't have to do this research. You don't have to do this research here to know that aspirin will help with pain, or that statins do something to do with the cholesterol. And so we don't have to do the research over to know that this works. And what we have done is look at the children's reading and their increases in their ability to read after a number of hours of intervention, and we know that it works. What, do I have a minute? No, I don't want to do this. I want to skip ahead, actually. While I was sitting here talking, listening to you all, and when I realized that I was reduced from 15 minutes to 10 minutes, I just want to talk about what the association does. Because dyslexia is a mental health issue. Just very quickly, Alison Hammersmith was reminding me about some research that was done in the States where someone looked at suicide notes of adolescents. And it was an enormous percentage of suicide notes. I can't tell you the number because I wasn't really looking into this to do this talk, but it was in the range of 70 to 75% of suicide notes had really enormous spelling problems, sort of bizarre spelling, the kind of spelling that dyslexics do. And so there is a link to reading failure and suicide. We know there's a link, reading failure and prison incarceration and delinquency. We know there is an enormous link to reading failure and stress. Is that my 1 minute or is that my end?
Yes, that's the last.
All right, so very quickly, the Dyslexia Association, we train teachers, we've trained over 900 teachers in Trinidad. So if you have somebody presenting with stress or suicidal tendencies and the primary reason is literacy, you can just refer students to us. We run a bursary fund, we pay for the lessons. We will refer dyslexics to train to tutor in Betsy's Hope, Matura, Maruga, Siparia, wherever you are. We don't have any in Erin, but or Icarcus. But we can find teachers all over Trinidad who will teach these children these very specific methods that have been involved in this research that we know works. And we have an audiobook library and books and DVDs on dyslexic and related difficulties. And I forgot to bring my flyers, but we are on the web. If you type in Dyslexia Association, dyslexia, we're the first one that comes up. And if you look at the telephone book, we're under D. So do use us. Thank you.